righty, what an honor it is to be with our family today. Thank you so much, Michael, for such a great input. And now it's my turn today. I started with 5, and would you believe I actually end up finding 10. So we'll talk about 10 things that can hinder.
You've done that before, my friend. I know. You have a number in mind, and you end up with a lot more. But go ahead, bring it on.
I want to give more. So
that's right. We're okay with that.
First of all, on behalf of our local Equitable Escrow unit, we have our senior escrow officer, Priscilla Garcia, 25 years in the business, knows everything about escrows in Coachella Valley. Angie Beer, 15 years in the business. Among them, we got 40 years together. Again, everything, all this time here in the Valley. Monica Perez, who doesn't appear in the picture here, she's got 5 years as a TC and a couple of years as an escrow assistant. We are fully staffed and ready here to meet all your needs. And I'll talk about this slide at the end, but the main thing is we're here to serve. The topic that I was presented here to present to the HomeSmart family of real estate agents is how to prevent those common escrow delays. And we want to let's look at 10. I started with 5 and I'm like, wait a minute, but what about this? And what about that? And what? So I ended up being like 12 and then I cut them down to 10. So here we go. And again, a lot of this should resonate if you have experience in real estate with you. We just don't want to pinpoint them for the next couple of minutes. We want to also learn how to prevent them. Number one, probably the number one issue are lending issues. Whether it is the underwriting process taking place and escrows fall apart because the buyer ended up buying a big television or a car. The buyer switched jobs without telling you. The buyer discovered additional debt, encountered difficulties in providing the required documents for self-employment. All these things should be taken care of if you represent the buyer at the buyer's one-on-one presentation. Just like we have a listing presentation, we also have a buyer's presentation, and actually you have it in your back office. Go to Real Smart Agent on the dashboard, you go through a marketing, and then you'll be able at the MDC to find listing presentations and buyer's presentations. I have a few of my own as well. If you're interested, let me know and I'll send them out your way. But these buyer presentations are huge to be able to tell the buyer what's expected during the time of escrow, what things to avoid. Again, it has to do with doing financial changes, switching jobs, or even if reduction in hours during the escrow process takes place. Many managers, many business owners, knowing that their employees are working, to get into a home, will work with them and being able not to diminish those hours that are so much needed to be able to qualify, especially when they get those 2 or 3 verification of employment calls, right? So very, very important that we have a conversation. Lending issues is most of the time the number one reason why escrows fall apart or delay. Now, on the listing side, of course, you have, let's say, for example, multiple offers. You are representing your seller. You want to choose the right buyer. Of course, many times, if there are no contingencies, a cash deal, that is more interesting than maybe 50% down and no contingencies, which is more interesting than 5% down or 3.5 FHA and contingencies. So if you are in that scenario and you have maybe a pool of buyers or just one buyer that's a FHA with contingencies, you may want to talk to that buyer's agent, make sure that the lender has given them a DU, desk underwriter's letter of approval, not just a pre-approval letter, but something with more teeth into that, so that you can present a DU, desk underwriters. It's a software that acts as an underwriter and takes in all the information from that buyer and predicts a better outcome of what an underwriter will almost always do. So a DU letter together with a pre-qual letter is strong to be able to present that to your seller and makes you look good. And in the event something does fall apart, well, the seller is going to want to make sure you as a professional did your due diligence in helping them choose the right buyer, or if it's only one scenario, to make sure that that buyer is a strong buyer. So again, very, very important. Also, if it's at that price, and we'll talk about the low appraisals here in a moment, you also want to know if the buyer has cash on hand to be able to pay the difference if the appraisal comes low. But number one, lending issues is something that we see all the time in escrow land. Number two, of course, we always tell in these presentations, two entities go in underwriting, right? Underwriters are like people with, white shirts, black ties, dark sunglasses, right? And they are looking into the life of the buyer and of the property. So again, lender needs to make sure that that the property has some sort of an inspection. Sometimes those are waived, but if they are not, the seller, maybe for example, has not done any type of inspection, they've lived it for a long time, you want to have that meeting with the seller, especially if you look at the home and it's kind of disheveled, it's not maybe up to par. You want to have that conversation with the seller because nobody likes surprises in an escrow. The buyer doesn't like it, the seller doesn't like it. So again, you can't call that mold, you can't call them termites, but maybe perhaps it would be good to have some sort of a home inspection before we put the best lipstick and dress on this baby and put it out there in the selling market. So please have that conversation with the sellers. And again, things are found during an inspection, sometimes are unsavory, and sometimes buyers, before that 17-day contingency period, will walk away with their EMD, right? So we want to make sure that if you feel that the house is not in optimal condition, you have some sort of a home inspection already done. Okay, number three, hazard disclosures. During the escrow process, you're going to get your natural hazard disclosures from your NHD company. Read it. We have seen escrows fall apart because it was discovered and maybe the agent was an out-of-town agent or not a professional agent in that specific neighborhood. But lo and behold, it happens to be that it's in a commercial flight path. It could be that it's just a couple of blocks away from a super fun site like up in the Jurupa Valley area where I grew up at. Out there in the Rubidoux area, Glen Avon area. You have these toxic areas. And if you're a few blocks away, you didn't know about that until you found that out in the NHD. Or it could be that you're buying in a flood zone or a wind, and we know this in Palm Springs, as well as in Phoenix, the wind-blown sand area, liquefaction area where soils is just, just sinking. Or of course, here in Southern California, the seismic zones. Again, all these things could be an issue. Buyer did not know. The seller's agent should know the area well, should know also how to read an NHD, bring things up as they're needed. You don't want these to creep up on you here toward the middle or the end of the escrow. It just gets ugly. So again, hazard disclosures, read them and convey them as needed. Okay, low appraisals. Of course, this is something we all hold our breath, cross our fingers and hands and everything so that the appraiser comes in and it comes in at the right price, right? So why are these needed? We all know why. An appraiser is a third party. They conduct this for taxation purposes. The bank that's lending, if it's in a lending situation, they want to protect their lender's interest. If they do default, they want to be able to get their funds back, recoup their losses. And if it's too low, either the seller needs to renegotiate the price or the buyer needs to have that cash on hand to pay for the difference. Again, these are conversations to be had on the listing side. If you know your seller wants that high price, you need to have that conversation with them. And if the buyer really wants a property, they need to have some cash on hand in the event that it does not come in at value. So again, those are things that we find in escrow land, and we want to make sure that those are all talked about as we don't want to find surprises along the escrow. Number 5, and I put this one in here because I know I lost a deal over this, and that was on the chandeliers, right? So let's talk about personal property. By default, anything that's movable, it's personal, right? So, so what happens to the chandeliers? What happens to certain furniture or certain um, uh, uh, coverings on the wall, or uh, whatever you want to have on the window coverings. Whatever it is that is going with the seller should be clearly made very evident, whether it be on agent remarks in the MLS, whether it also be, if you have it on the RPA, to put exactly what personal is going or outside of escrow as per inventory list. So you want to have some sort of a list that what is staying behind that's personal and what is not. And we have seen in experiences that we've had, whether you, myself, where there are certain things that the buyer just loved it and they thought that they could just take it with them. And at the end of the day, they're doing their final walkthrough and that chandelier is not there. But wait a minute, it reminded me of my grandma's chandelier. That's why I wanted to get this house. And now we have an issue, right? So please make sure we have that really clearly spelled out, itemized, whether it be an inventory list as an attachment in the RPA, some sort of an addendum, something that escrow can have that has been executed by both parties, so there are no surprises that can kill or delay escrows. Okay, number 6. And this one is outside really of our control, but maybe sometimes not. So once in a while, there's going to be some issues with public records. Title will fix it. But just know that some stuff does happen. If you are dealing with Hispanics, you want to make sure that the name on the RPA matches the government issued ID. For example, my name is Harold Zapata, but my full name is Harold Jose Zapata Parra. Harold because of my dad, Jose because of my mom's dad, Zapata, my dad's last name, Parra, my mom's last name. That's just the way it is in Latin America or some Asian countries. So you want to make sure that you are filling out the RPA with the government issued ID name as it appears in a government issued ID. That can also help any issues in terms of clerical errors, misspelling of names. And by the way, it ends up happening that some people do take vacations and they're out, and where they're at, there's no Wi-Fi and you can't DocuSign. And so just want to eliminate those things, make it, whether you're on the buyer's or seller side, make it very clear, spell out their name, no errors, please, because we will, at the escrow, especially title, put it exactly as you're typing it in. So that's pretty important. Number 7 is actually something we're finding a lot as well. And here goes, it's similar to number 6, but clouds on title. We got to have a clear title in order for the transaction to move forward, for the issuance of the new owner to take place. And that's where we get title insurance. Of course, we deal with all the major ones. In California, we're not a title company. Equitable is just escrow. We partner with Fidelity and First American and Orange and Tycor and lawyers and all these fine people. But we want to make sure that there's no forgery, there's no fraud. All liens that we're able to find out in the preliminary title report, such as it could be mechanics lien, private lender, child support, alimony, things of that nature, judgments against the property, liens from the IRS. We want to take care of them, before the transfer takes place. It has to be resolved before the close of escrow. So here's one. If you have a listing presentation, again, you may want to ask a couple of questions. Who is on title? And it can be as simple as that, because we had an issue where the whole family was placed on title, including a 17-year-old, which by law, you got to be 18 and above. And that hindered the close of escrow, and it has still not closed, and we're over 70 days in. So there are some lawyers that got to get into it. They are not divorce lawyers. They are real estate lawyers, and you have to do certain things with people that are under 18. And so my point is, let's not find that out, a week into the escrow being open when we get the prelim. Let's make sure that we know that ahead of time, and we can start getting ready for those things. And that way it can be a smooth close of escrow. Number 8, sellers short on cash. And that's interesting where we're at right now. it's still, you know, it's still a seller's market. It's becoming kind of I can't say a buyer's market yet, but as we're transitioning away, it's kind of cooling off a bit. We're starting to see less multiple offers, more of the natural, normal way of doing real estate. But sometimes in a time where it is not recession, but you know, more difficult times, we start seeing now more notices of default. We start seeing now a couple of more short sales coming in the market, a couple more foreclosures coming on the market, especially as a moratorium has been kind of halted by the Supreme Court. So um, sellers may become short on cash. In other words, they don't have enough equity to sell it, so they have to come in with the difference in cash. That's a that's an important conversation to be had in the listing presentation. How much do you currently owe on it? Think what the sales price should be. If they're very, very close, you need to open that conversation and say, okay, what if it's below that? Do you have cash on hand to close this? And if not, then is this a short sale scenario instead of a regular resale? So again, conversations to be had based on smart questions so that we don't have issues during the escrow process, right? We want to make sure seller has cash on hand in the event that they don't have enough equity to sell. Number 9, especially up in the Palm Springs area, some Palm Desert area, but the more south we go, we kind of see less land leasing, more fee simple. But man, Bureau of Indian Affairs. I went there every day between January and April. I was assisting with the office every day, and it's literally every day going there because it's another beast. Okay, just know that the Bureau of Indian Affairs is going to require that both the seller and the buyer each pay $250 each so that they can process a land lease deal that has to go through BIA. So again, have that conversation with the seller. Mr. Seller, I'm glad that this land lease goes to the year 2079, but did you know that you're gonna have to pay $250 out of your pocket during escrow? Same thing, talk to the buyer, because again, we just wanna manage those expectations. And then of course, it's not gonna happen in 30 days. BIA itself takes 10 business days, 2 additional weeks. Really the fastest that we can do a BIA with, let's say there's everything's smooth as silk, it's about 45 days. BIA, you really should be thinking about 60-day escrow. So just keep that in the recesses of your mind and manage expectations. It's gonna make you look good and make you look like the professional that you are. And what can I say about number 10, número 10, HOAs. So it's not just good to know that you have an HOA. The conversation should look like, how many HOAs are you paying every month? Because in many communities, not in many, but in some communities, not only is there the big HOA that everyone has, but there are sections in the community and they have a second HOA. And we know of one community that has even a third HOA by a couple of blocks. And people are glad to pay 3 HOAs. But what escrow needs to know, we need to know who they are, how do we get in contact with them, and payments. We gotta make sure that the seller is up to date with all their HOA payments and fees. Sometimes, you know, things happened and they have been assessed a fee and they have to be paid. Believe me, if we find that out and seller says, I'm not paying this, you know, my dog was barking too loud or whatever, and I charged $75, guess who's paying it out of his commission or her commission? You are, right? You want to close the deal. We don't want that. We want to know that the seller has been up to date in all their payments and so forth. And the HOA may charge a fee to transact, pulling all the documentation necessary to give it to escrow. And we need to get that paid by the seller as soon as possible at the beginning of escrow, definitely not toward the end. That can delay it, and it takes time. So, so a good rule of thumb is day 0, right? You open escrow, day 3, earnest money deposit. As soon as we get that EMD and escrow instructions go out, we want to make sure we have that contact information with the HOAs and that you've talked to your seller to send them that check directly. and then we can just have a smooth close of escrow. It takes time to work with the HOAs. Our ladies will communicate with them directly, but the seller needs to pay whatever HOA fee they may charge. Again, just to do a quick review. Lending issues, right? Number one, have a conversation with the buyer. And if you're with the seller, make sure you get a desk underwriter approval, if at all possible. Number two, property defects. If the seller has been there for a long time, do everything you can to get some sort of a roof cert or termite or some home inspection so that there are no surprises during the escrow. Many times buyers do walk away when that takes place. Hazard disclosures, read your NHD, know how to translate it to your clients, make sure that everyone knows what and where they're buying. In case of low appraisals, make sure that you have a couple of things I forgot to mention. If you're able to meet the appraiser on the property, give him or her your comps. It could be that they don't have them, and that could be the main difference. So try to make that as much as you can as a rule of thumb to meet them at the property with or email them, but I'd rather meet them and make sure they had it in their hand, your comps and why you put it at that price, and then that'll help them down the road as well. And then, of course, make sure you have the conversation with the seller in the event that it comes under value, and with the buyer in the event that they need to come up with cash. Conversation. Number five, personal property. Make sure that you spell out what's staying behind, what's not. You don't want to lose everything because the grandma's chandeliers were taken off. So anyways, number six, errors, misspelled. These are little tiny things. They will get, cured quickly. But number seven, clouds on title can kill a whole escrow. It can kill it. We got to make sure if we're going through a divorce as well, going through probate, we need to be made aware of all those things as well. Seller short on cash, have that conversation. BIA, manage expectations. 250, 60-day close of escrow is a good rule of thumb. And HOAs.
Wait, I'm going to interrupt you on BIAs real quick because Jeff had a question about it. BIA fees do not need to be paid up front as HOA fees do. Is that correct? He wants to know.
Oh, yes, they do. Yeah. We have to submit those 250 and 250 with a check from the seller and a check from the buyer with the packet. So the answer is yes. Like HOAs, we need to get those checks up front.
There you go.
Yep, good question. And then of course, we want to thank you on behalf of Priscilla and Angie and Monica. Equitable is one with HomeSmart. We're owned by the same man, Matt Widows. We want to be part of that closing team with all your smart partners. We are the smart partner with HomeSmart. I am a HomeSmart employee. We work hand in hand with your sellers to make you look good, with your buyers to make you look good. If we have any Latinos here and you're in the Latino niche market, Priscilla habla español, Mónica Pérez from Guadalajara habla español, yo soy de Cali, Colombia, yo hablo español. And believe me, it does make a big difference when you're putting the fear of God in people in Spanish, when you're telling them, when you send in the EMD and the closing funds, don't send the wire until we speak, because there are bad people out there. And we do this in English and Spanish, right? We want to make sure that everyone knows it's part of our best practices at the beginning to put that fear of God in the buyers, making sure that this does not happen. Unfortunately, in the past, with almost 100% of escrow companies and title companies, there have been people who've been stealing emails and making them look just like our email, and they send different wiring instructions. And again, we want to make sure, English or Spanish, we're telling people that Equitable is part of what we do with HomeSmart, whether we're getting ready for this. Don't forget, guys, this, of course, Friday, we're all going to see each other at the Cedar, Palm Desert. And Saturday, early in the morning, we're all wearing pink, right? And we're doing the paint the pink up in the Palm Desert area. So we're going to make sure that we're all part of that. If you have not signed up, I don't think it's still too late. Talk to Heather. She's the young lady here in the middle, our office manager. Whether it be hikes early in the morning, whether it be luau's, whether it be after hour parties, whether it be lunch and learns, one-on-one, or our Q15 top agent luncheons. We're part of what is happening at HomeSmart, and we want to help you. And we understand a couple of things. Being led by quality, integrity, and productivity, we know that 50% or more of 55% of what people are responding to when we're visiting with them, yeah, they like to know about our brand name, that we're one with HomeSmart. They love also our prices, very competitive. They like to see staff consistency, that we are, here's Priscilla, that we are fully staffed. They want to make sure that your payments, you get paid quickly. And of course, being part of HomeSmart, we're able to do that quickly. But the most important thing that agents want is communication. And we want you to know we're nearing that 96% of all phone calls being picked up within the first 4 rings. We've added staff to make sure that's being done. Our escrow instructions go out 24 to 48 hours after receiving the EMD. We're closing a ton of escrows 30 days, at 35 days, even with a little bit of financing. We're on it, and we're wanting to always make you look good. So basically, on behalf of the girls here, well, I'm Harold Zapata. I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity of sharing, and I'd like to open it up right now for any questions that you all may have.